Okay, we'll make a start then. So good afternoon, everyone, and really warm welcome to our webinar this afternoon. I'm Mel Hewson, I'm the Director of NPQs at Ambition Institute, so really delighted to welcome you to this webinar, and we're going to go through everything that's new about these new frameworks in the NPQs, and lovely to see in the chat that there are lots of ones and twos. That's great for us. That means we can do a lot of knowledge building over the next 3/4 of an hour. Some people got up to about a 3 or a 4, so may have done some reading on our website or on the DFE's website about the reformed NPQs. So that's really useful to help Katie and myself pitch that. If we kick off now, and if we can move on to the next slide, that'll be really useful. We know that you're really busy people, so delighted that you've taken this time out, and especially to prioritise your own development, and that's important for you in your fulfilment in your job and your career, but it's also the very best thing that you can do for the students in your care, is for us all to keep getting better in the classroom and in our leadership. So I'm sure that we're all familiar with the laws of Zoom, especially after the last year, but just to be sure, if you could keep yourself muted so that we can reduce background noise, and continue to pop any comments or questions in the chat as we go through. We've only got 45 minutes together. Katie and I can testify that there's probably at least a day's worth of information and questions that we could go through today. So we'll keep an eye on the chat as we go through, so please do ask away. And if we can't answer anything within our allotted time today, then we'll be sure to contact you after the session and continue that discussion. So what we've got on this call today is a range of classroom teachers, heads of subject, heads of phase. We've got those of you who are aspiring to middle leadership. We've also got current middle leaders. And we're going to show you what's new about the NPQs, why we think they really matter to the sector and to outcomes for our children and students, and things like the nuts and bolts of how you can find out if you're eligible for funding in your school. And we're also going to tell you a little bit about us, because we know that some people on this webinar have completed programmes with us before, but there's also lots and lots of you who are brand new to us. So we really want to give you a sense of who we are as an organisation, and hopefully you'll want to come on board with us, because we'd really love to have you. I'm here with my colleague Katie Patton, and Katie is our Dean of Learning Design. So I'll hand over briefly to Katie so that she can introduce herself.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Katie. I work in our design team at Ambition, overseeing a brilliant team, designing the 6 new NPQs and the additional support offer, and feel really privileged to be working on those programs, because I think they have an enormous potential to transform how we think about leadership and the leadership of teaching in our schools, for the benefit of all of the pupils that attend our schools. So really excited, enthusiastic and privileged to be here today. Formerly a history teacher in a South East London secondary school and deputy director of sixth form. So ultimately my first love is like getting under the hood of learning and how you make it happen. So yeah, that's me. I'm looking forward to answering your questions about the session at the end as well.
Great.
Over to you, Mel.
Thank you. Thanks, Katie. And Katie and her brilliant design team have been getting really strong feedback from both the EEF and the DFE. So we're feeling really confident that we're bringing you the very best design, and that's grown from a really strong evidence base that will support you in improving your already great practice. So a little bit about Ambition Institute. We are an organisation that exists to help schools transform the life chances of disadvantaged young people. And we do that by helping teachers like you and those in your schools to keep getting better. And the evidence tells us that the quality of teaching is the most important factor within a school's control in improving those outcomes for children. And our best teachers have an even greater impact on those from disadvantaged backgrounds. We know that children from a disadvantaged background are much less likely to go to university and to secure a professional job, and they're also less likely to own a home, or more likely to work in low-paying jobs. But we believe that great teachers like you, can help to turn that around. And this isn't just a stab in the dark. All the evidence suggests that professional development is likely to be the most effective tool that we have to improve learning and outcomes for all pupils. And in fact, the research suggests that the impact of teachers on pupil outcomes is 3 times greater than that of any other school-based factor. So what we can see here is a little bit about how professional development impacts on teachers and leaders in our sector as a whole. So firstly, the research tells us that professional development for teachers is proven to support teachers' retention in the sector, and that is particularly significant for new teachers. So the support that new teachers receive significantly increases retention over the first 5 years of teachers' careers. Throughout a teacher's career then, those increased levels of professional development are associated with a reduced desire for teachers to move schools, and then improving the performance of serving teachers is 3 times more likely and more effective in raising standards than the combined effort of all attempts to improve teaching through replacements, through replacing those teachers with new people. We know that high quality CPD for teachers has a significant impact on pupils' learning outcomes. And we also know that sadly, most teachers tend to stop improving after the first 5 to 10 years of their career, but effective professional development can prevent that plateau, and it enables teachers to continue improving at the same rate. So all of that research leads me nicely onto the new NPQ framework and what's changing about that framework and why. You will know that the National Professional Qualifications, or NPQs, are a national voluntary suite of qualifications designed to support the professional development of teachers and school leaders. And the idea is that they equip teachers with the expertise to lead sustainable improvement across their schools. From this year, so from November 21, there's a brand new framework, and the overhaul of NPQs is significant, and they really are the reforms of a generation. The first thing that you'll notice, I think, if you're familiar with the old suite of NPQs, is that the NPQML, the NPQ for middle leaders, has now gone. And in its place are these 3 new specialist qualifications, which will allow middle leaders and senior leaders to develop further specialist expertise whilst remaining in the classroom. The remaining leadership qualifications then for senior leaders, for head teachers and executive leaders have also been reformed to give a much more comprehensive induction to the core knowledge and the practices required by those who lead our schools. We'll take a look now at the intention of these new frameworks and why they've been reformed, why the frameworks have been published by the Department for Education, and why we have written our new content and our new programmes. The first thing then is that these new programmes are underpinned by the latest evidence of what works. So there's much more attention being paid to establishing a common body of evidence which underpins the frameworks. The new frameworks have been developed by looking at a really broad evidence base, and that's all approved by the EEF, or Education Endowment Foundation, which I'm sure lots of you are familiar with. Obviously, no evidence base is ever conclusive, but we've become a lot more informed with the evidence over the last 10 years across schools. And I think it's a really positive thing that a lot of this is now being captured, it's being codified into professional qualifications. And like any good curriculum, we will continue to debate and to challenge and to defend it, and that will lead to refinement over time. Secondly, they're really focused on what teachers and school leaders need to know and be able to do. So the frameworks take us a step forward, as I said, in codifying a core body of professional knowledge and practice. There's a much greater attention being paid to specific things that teachers need to know and be able to do, and we're going to go on and discuss this a little bit more shortly. And this core body of knowledge, finally, knowledge and practice, provides what's being described as the golden thread that should run throughout every stage of a teacher's career. And this means that schools and trusts can have greater confidence that through professional development, all their educators, from early careers teachers through to leaders of multiple schools, are building and developing their practice from exactly the same evidence base and similar frameworks. Let's take a look then at where our NPQs sit within that golden thread that I mentioned. And you can see here that the NPQs really are central to the professional development frameworks that span a teacher's career. And research suggests that teachers spend approximately 10 days a year engaged in professional development across our workforce. That's about 5 million days. And I know that in my career as a teacher and a senior leader and a head, often the professional development and the training that I received could feel a little bit ad hoc or disjointed, and maybe even lacking in coherence. And a key focus of these reforms is that we're able to make professional development more effective, more coherent by building it on this same core body of professional knowledge. This means it's easier to ensure that professional development connects from what's gone before, and that it sets teachers and leaders up for the next stage of their professional learning. And I think it's something that as teachers, we all spend a lot of time thinking really, really hard about for the sake of our students. So what do we want our students to learn? How do I sequence this learning? How do I go back and retrieve that learning? And now, for the first time, that same care and attention is being paid to what and how we learn as teachers and leaders right across the sector. And so the new frameworks are much more coherent than previous versions. We'll be using the same more consistent language and terminology, and really bring with us that sense of coherence so that you can track your development as you move through your career. I think what we'll do now that we've got a bit of a sense of what's been reformed, why that's taken place, we'll dig into those specialist qualifications. And here they are, we saw them on a previous slide. But as I said, that middle leadership qualification has gone, and now we have these 3 new specialist qualifications. And the aim here is that progression doesn't need to mean promotion outside of the classroom. And there can be a tendency, I think, in any sector, not just in education, to think about career progression as moving up out of your current job into a leadership role. And in a school context, that can often create pressure on teachers to equate progress with moving away from what we all love, and that's teaching pupils in the classroom. The specialist NPQs therefore validate educators who choose to focus on developing their in-class practice through numerous professional development options, and this will support teachers to help them to keep getting better in their own classroom. They're really relevant, and by that I mean all NPQs aim to provide the knowledge that teachers need. What do they need to know and be able to do? So for example, if you're thinking about how to develop an excellent culture, how to implement change, how to develop and bring staff along with you through professional development. So as an example, a teacher on the NPQ for leading teaching would be learning about how to design a great curriculum, but also alongside that, how do I develop actionable insights into how I might implement this curriculum across my department? So we'll take a look then at those 3 specialist qualifications in more detail, and I'm going to start with this one, the leading teacher development. And this qualification is really aimed at people who have or who aspire to have responsibility for developing other teachers. So you might be a mentor in a school, you might be the CPD lead, you might be an ITT lead or a head of department. So anybody in a school that is responsible for developing other teachers around them, or if you're a classroom teacher and you feel as though that's an area in your career that you might want to move into. And so we'll become an expert teacher. All the training is evidence-based and it's informed by the science of learning. And you'll be answering questions like, how do we learn? How do our students learn? How do the teachers around me learn? How do we make that new knowledge stick? And how do I develop that in the teachers around me in my school? And when we say champion quality teaching, what we do know is that many teachers who end up in leadership roles haven't really had any formal training in how to become teacher educators. So I know that early in my career, I was asked to mentor new teachers, NPQs or ECTs as we're now calling them, and nobody yet told me how to do that. And I went off with the very, very best of intentions to develop those new teachers around me, but I didn't know if I was doing it correctly, if I was developing them in the most efficient way. And so this programme fills that gap by giving you the knowledge and insight to make classroom teaching in your school the best that it can be. And we know that developing other teachers is really, really complex work. As adults, we don't change easily, we don't change our habits and our behaviours easily, and it's very, very difficult for us to do. So if you're trying to develop teachers in your phase or in your department or even across your school, how do we do it in such a way that it will impact on their habits and their behaviours and their decisions? Because the teachers in your school are not going to change their classroom practice just because we sit them in the hall for CPD and ask them to start doing things differently. It's really complex work, it needs careful planning, and the change always takes longer than we think. So in this qualification, you'll be taken through exactly how we plan and deliver that high quality professional development for the teachers in your school in a way that has a long-lasting impact. I think it's really important to point out that all 3 of these specialist qualifications have been designed so that they can fit around your busy timetable. We know that you're busy, and much of this work can therefore be completed in really short bursts. So you might commit 40 minutes a week, for example, and fit that in around your timetable. And we're going to look at those time commitments in a little bit more detail shortly. And also really important for us and really important for you that you get the opportunity to connect with your peers, and you will train and collaborate with other teachers and leaders on the programme and sharing those experiences and building a network. So on the next slide, we have some information around eligibility and who might be suitable for this qualification. So I'm just going to give you a moment to read through that, and then I'll take us through some of the detail. So just take a moment to read that slide for me. If we start then on the left-hand side in terms of eligibility, we are working with schools in England. So we're not working with international schools at the moment, and that includes schools in Wales and Scotland. We're just working with schools in England. We're also on our central programmes not working with teachers in independent schools. However, if you are in an independent school, you will be able to do these qualifications through one of our delivery partners, and we will support you in making those contacts. I think a really important aspect of leading teacher development is this eligibility column here. If you are teaching in a state school, any state school in England, then this programme is fully funded for you. And there's no limit on that. We have some schools that are putting every head of department onto this qualification because it's being funded by the DfE. It's not going to cost the school any money. And so if you're teaching in a state schools currently, you are entitled to full funding for the NPQ in leading teacher development. People that we would say are a green flag role are if you're a head of ITT, if you're a mentor, you might be coaching an early careers teacher this year, definitely a CPD lead, and that might be a deputy head. You know, I think a big misconception is that because the NPQ ML, the middle leaders, has gone and that these qualifications has appeared, that these are aimed at middle leaders, but the content is absolutely appropriate for those senior leaders as well. So you might be a deputy head in charge of teaching and learning, head of department, second in maths, any class teacher, they would all be green flag roles for us. In terms of people where we think you may be taking on a little bit too much would be if you're an early careers teacher and you're already following an ECT programme, or if you're a non-teaching member of staff. And by that I mean you really need to be able to practice and apply the learning from this programme as you go through your day-to-day job. We will take a look then next at leading teaching. And leading teaching really is aimed at professionals in schools who lead a group of teachers. So you may be in a secondary school, you might be a head of science or a head of art or a head of English. In primary, you might be a head of phase, you might be a head of key stage, or you may be a classroom teacher that has aspirations to move into that head of department or head of phase type role. And in this role, firstly, we'll delve into the nuts and bolts of what makes an effective teacher. What does good teaching actually look like and how do we know? And how can you lead other teachers around you and how can they learn from you? You'll build on your existing experience. The programme helps you to unpack and apply learning in teaching and curriculum and assessment. So it's really getting into the nuts and bolts of planning a curriculum and planning out the pedagogy that will support the delivery of that curriculum. Again, important that we recognise this has been chunked so that it will fit around your weekly timetable. You'll be committing 40 to 45 minutes a week to this. And again, that opportunity to connect with your peers. So if we look on the next slide at the eligibility and suitability for this qualification, we'll see a couple of differences. Again then, same schools apply. So if you are a school in England and if you are a teacher within one of those schools, then you're very welcome to come into the programme. In terms of eligibility for the funding, it's slightly different for this one. So what the DfE have done is they have identified the top 6,500 schools out of about 20,000 schools in England who fall into that top 30% of pupil premium schools. If you're in one of those schools, if you're in the top 30th percentile of those schools, then this programme will be fully funded for you. And if you're not, you're still eligible, you're still welcome to come onto the programme, but the cost to your school would then be £900. In terms of green flag roles, this is really, really appropriate for a head of department. This would take the head of department through how they plan their long-term curriculum, their mid and their short-term curriculum, and how they develop the teachers in their team to deliver that curriculum. Or again, as I said, a head of key stage or a head of phase in a primary school. We'll take a look at the third one then, the third specialist qualification, which is the NPQ in behaviour and culture. And when we look at this one's aimed at people who lead behaviour in a school or some aspect of that area. And again, you might be a head of department, but you might also be a head of year or a head of house, for example. You might be a classroom teacher who would like to move into that area of our career. And I think it's really worth noting for this particular qualification is that you don't have to have QTS to engage with these programs. So you don't have to have qualified teacher status. And so you could have a situation in your school where you have a non-teaching head of year, and they would be perfectly eligible to join this programme as well. So just to reiterate, we don't need to have qualified teacher status to engage in any of these programmes. On this programme then, we will look at how we develop knowledge in leading behaviour and culture and how we apply it in practice in our schools to engage and motivate staff and pupils and to reduce that disruption in classrooms. We'll be developing and learning how to manage individual classrooms, how to develop those school-wide systems and processes that support pupils and really get the best out of them. And again, as with the previous two qualifications, absolutely chunked down and designed to be flexible, designed to be able to fit around your working week. And you'll be building your network because you'll be working, learning, applying this knowledge with people in your network, work in similar contexts to you, and that'll give you the opportunity to share your experiences and build a valuable support network. So again, we'll just look at the nitty-gritty details of this around who's eligible, etc. So again, if you're in an English school and if you're in a state school, you're eligible to work on this programme. The funding criteria is exactly the same as the one I just went through for leading teaching, in that it will be fully funded if you're in the top 30th percentile of pupil premium schools. If not, you're more than welcome to join the programme, but the cost to your school would be £900. And green flag roles here are a little bit different, a little bit of a wider net. Still more than welcome and very eligible to do this programme if you're a head of department or if you're a classroom teacher. But also now we start to see roles like head of year or a safeguarding lead, a Senko, a head of house. So really we're starting to feel those different roles coming through in terms of suitability for this qualification. If we could then move on and have a look at the programme overview, because if I were sitting in your shoes, I would be asking questions like, how does this hang together? How often will I be out of school? What kind of time commitment is it? And so what you can see here is the full year of each of the specialist qualifications. So all three of these specialist qualifications last for 12 months. They will start this November and they will finish in October 2022. You can see here that we're going to kick off with a 2-week induction, and that will take place online. It will be a couple of hours. We will release it to you 2 weeks ahead of the programme start date. And so you'll have a week in October of term time and a week of October in half term. And you can choose what's best to you to engage with that induction material. And there we'll be looking at your programme orientation, what are the components that are coming up, familiarising yourself with our online learning platform, which is called StepLab. So all of that will be done before the programme start in November. When we get to this first dark blue block then, this is the programme launch at the start of November, and we kick off with a 6-hour conference. Now, ordinarily, we would love that to be face-to-face and we'd love to have you all in a room together, but because of continued COVID concerns, we've made the decision to do it just for this year online. And so we'll have a 6-hour conference where we really dig into the science of learning that underpins lots of our content, and also some of the implementation. And we will be looking at the course content that's coming up so that you feel as though you have a really secure grounding about your programme journey and what the rest of the year will look like. Each of these dark blue blocks then is a half term. You can see that there's 6 of those running throughout the programme. And in each of those 6-week courses, there is some online learning, there is some virtual clinics that will be facilitated, and you will meet with a clinic group of around 15 other participants. And there's also communities, which are networking opportunities where you'll meet the same group of people. I'm going to zoom into those in a moment, but before we do, I just want to draw your attention to this 3-month assessment window at the end. So this is a big change. This is one of the biggest changes with the reformed NPQs when we compare it to the old style NPQs. And if you're familiar with the old NPQs, if you did an NPQML, for example, you'll be aware that the way that those NPQs were assessed was through projects that you had to implement alongside your CPD. And that could become quite unwieldy. It was a very high workload to do your day-to-day job and to come to these extra CPD sessions and to then have to implement a project as you went through the programme. And so we have listened, and the DfE have listened to feedback in terms of workload. And so those projects have been removed completely. And I think this makes these programmes much more attractive, much more doable, much more realistic in terms of running them alongside your busy day-to-day lives. The assessment then is a 3-month window that comes at the end of your programme. So if you're going to start this programme this November, that 3-month assessment window will start next November, November 2022. And at the start of November next year, there will be an 8-day assessment window. And on the first day of those 8 days, we will release to you a 2,000-word case study that's designed to assess all of the knowledge and the information that you've picked up throughout the programme. You will then have 8 days to respond to that case study in a 1,500-word response. And we then have 3 months to mark it, to moderate it, and to feed your results back to you. So actually, although it says it's a 3-month assessment window, the part that you play in that is an 8-day window where you would be writing your case study. So as I said, much more attractive, much more manageable. You'll be assessed on a 1,500-word case study alone. If we then zoom into one of these half-term blocks, this is what each half-term looks like. So I'll just give you a moment to absorb some of that information. So what you can see here is a half term, and this same pattern, this same cadence repeats itself 6 times as we go through the year-long programme. These blue and yellow blocks that you can see, the insight and the application modules, they are weekly modules that you will be completing on our online platform called StepLab. So on week 1, you will log on to StepLab. You'll need about 40 or 45 minutes per week. And in that insight module, that's where you will engage with the evidence base. There will be some reading, there will be a video, there will be some self-reflection questions, and you'll really, as Katie said, get under the hood of the evidence and the research that underpins your programme. So 45 minutes independently, reading, watching videos, and answering some self-reflection questions. On week 2 then, in that yellow block, that application module, it'll really benefit your learning if you meet up with a buddy so that you can apply the learning from week 1 together. Now, that buddy might be somebody in your school who's also doing this qualification, and you might meet up face to face. If it's somebody that's at the other end of the country or is in another school, this can equally be done on Zoom as well. And during that 40 to 45 minutes, you'll be retrieving the information that came in the insight module. You'll be asking each other questions about how does it apply to your context? What are the actions that came out of that insight and that research that you feel you can go now and apply to your job? And that application, that discussion with one of your peers and the setting of action steps and being held to account a little bit by somebody else really helps us to implement our knowledge and apply our learning in a way that will start to shift our habits and shift our behaviours and our decision making in a way that sticks. So we have this pattern, this cadence of insight module, application module running throughout the half term. Alongside that then, we have 2-hour clinics each half term, and these are facilitated sessions. You will be brought together online again with a group of around 15 other people from your cohort, and this is really a chance to make sense of the insight modules that came in the previous half term. So the facilitator will be looking for common misconceptions. The facilitator will be supporting you in applying that new knowledge to your context and making sure that the learning is valuable, that it's usable, that it's really impacting on your practice and your behaviours in school. And then each half term, again, we have a 1-hour community, and that will be with the same people from your clinic group. So you're building up this really lovely network of people that you see in twice a half term. You're seeing them very regularly, and communities are not facilitated. So you have the chance to network with your peers. You have the chance to listen to how they've applied the new learning to their context. It's still very structured. We will still provide the protocol to make sure that that learning is scaffolded, but you will peer lead it with your clinic group. Okay, we will take a look then at the next slide. And this is just to reiterate, because I think it's a really, really important point, that those projects that were unwieldy and had a very, very heavy workload on the old style NPQs are now gone. So you wouldn't need to worry about the workload and the time commitments around that. You will just have that 8-day assessment window that will come in November 2022. Okay, we will look then at why we think ambition is important, why we would urge you to join us, and why we're excited about these. So firstly, as I said, Katie and her team have designed these to be really, really flexible. We've listened hard to what teachers and leaders have to say. We know that these qualifications and these professional development opportunities have to fit around your busy lives. And so we've designed those StepLab modules to be flexible. You can do them on your devices. You could do them in a non-contact period at school. You could do it on the bus. You can do it wherever you want to do it. It's a really flexible approach aimed to fit in around your busy life. We pride ourselves on our content design, and really that's our unique selling point. You know, our content is crisp, it's based in the evidence. We've got really, really strong feedback from the Department for Education and the EEF, and we're really proud of that content. And Katie will be able to talk us through if there are any questions around that during the Q&A session. In terms of technology, we've invested really, really heavily in the technology to support this. And StepLab, our platform, has been built by teachers, designed by teachers. There is no other platform out there that does what this does in terms of really being tailored to teachers' needs, being very coherent with those insight modules and exposing you to the evidence base, but more importantly, bringing together that buddy system so that you can apply that knowledge together on StepLab. You can really hold each other to account in terms of the action steps and how you're going to apply that learning. So in terms of next steps, where do we go from here? Our applications are going to close on the 12th of October. So we still have a few weeks until our applications close. I would urge you not to wait until the 11th of October because there is a certain number of these places for each of those qualifications, and we're approving applications as they come in. So we already have hundreds of participants that have been approved and are onboarded and are ready to start these programs in November. So please try not to wait until the 12th of October, but that is our official deadline. The best way to go about that then is to visit our website. And on our website, you will see an expression of interest form. And we've designed that form to be able to be done in under a minute, because again, we know that you're busy. You might be doing it over a lunch break or after a break duty, what have you. And in there, you're just putting your name, your school, the qualification that you're interested in. And from there, we will be back in touch with you to enable you to fill in the application form. Now, again, the application form we have kept really streamlined, very, very simple. We need to know what qualification that you're going for. And we also need to know that your current role will support you in being able to apply that knowledge, but not lots of questions. Probably a 20-minute job, certainly not a 2-hour job, for example. So we've made the process as streamlined as we possibly can. Your time commitment then would be, once you're approved and onboarded, we would be looking at sending you that induction package towards the end of October, and really looking forward to welcoming you to the first conference at the start of November. We know you'll have questions around eligibility. Is my school on that PP30 list? And we can check all of that eligibility for you as well once you make an inquiry through our website. So I think that's way too much talking from me. So I'm happy to open it out now to questions, and we will keep an eye on the themes that are coming through on the chat. But if there's anything else, please pop it into the chat now, and we will be able to answer those as we go through. So Katie, I'm probably going to hand over to you, because hopefully you've had a chance to scan through some of those questions, and you can see some common themes coming through.
Yes, I can. Excuse me. Thank you, Mel. I'll give you a break from the talking. So there's loads of great questions. I'm going to sort of start from the top, actually. So when you were talking about eligibility, we had a question about if you're a SENCO, whether that would be a suitable qualification for you to do leading teacher development. And I think if you're a SENCO in a primary or a secondary school, actually there's a number of qualifications that would be perfectly applicable to your role. Such a big part of being a SENCO is developing other teachers, using your expert knowledge to develop other teachers, to apply that kind of knowledge of how you create an inclusive environment for pupils in their lessons and their learning. Therefore, leading teacher development, I think, would be a great choice of a specialist qualification for a SENCO, even though it was listed on the eligibility list specifically for leading behaviour culture. Alternative, that would be a great programme for you. And similarly, there is a module within that on professional development and implementation as well. So yeah, I think very much either or would work for you as a SENCO. But if it's specifically a focus on how you disseminate that knowledge around special educational needs and disabilities in your school, teacher development would be a great qualification. There are a few questions, Mel, about funding, and I think you answered that one just now about how do I know if my school's in the top 30 at the point when you apply. Oh, and Pamela's just I think there's an eligibility checker on the website, but similarly when you go through the onboarding process, you can kind of whilst you go through that process, we can help you figure all that stuff out.
Yeah, so I can come in on that if that's okay, Katie.
Yeah,
so just as a reminder, leading teacher development funded for everybody in those state schools. Everybody, the simplest way is to go through an expression of interest form on our website, and there is an eligibility checker on there, so you can pop in the name of your school and you'll be able to check on our website if that school falls into that PP30 list.
There's a theme of questions coming up around do I do this programme with Ambition?
Yeah.
Or do I do it through a local hub? And I hadn't went, and some people have been to information evenings at local hubs, which was very similar. And people trying to understand, I think, what that means for them. Like, do they do the programme with Ambition, or do they do it with their local delivery partner, the teaching school hub, or with one of our delivery partners? And another question around who our delivery partners are. So those are all good questions for you, Mel.
Okay, so we are delivering these programmes through two routes. So the first one is we're delivering them all centrally, and that means it's our internal team of facilitators that would be facilitating each of those sessions for you. However, we're also working nationally with around 30 delivery partners. So those delivery partners on the whole are our new teaching school hubs. And so if you're in an area of the country where you fall into one of those networks, you may well have been contacted by your local teaching school hub who are delivering these programmes on our behalf. And so the choice is yours, really. You can go through your teaching school hub. They are using exactly the same content. We are giving them this content. It would therefore be the facilitators that differ. So you would be going to sessions within your teaching school hub, and the sessions would be being delivered by facilitators from that delivery partner, rather than our internal facilitators at Ambition Institute. So that's your absolutely your choice. You can do it through our central programmes, you can do it through delivery partners. When you come in through our website through an expression of interest form, you will see a map of England, and you will be able to click on that map about where your school is based, and the website will tell you if there are any delivery partners in your area that you can sign up with to go through one of these programmes. So your choice. We're delivering it through 30 delivery partners. We're also delivering them centrally. I'm going to pull out one about time commitments, Katie, because somebody has asked a brilliant question Does this mean that I'll only be out of school for the 6-hour conference? And yes, that's absolutely what it means. So you will have a conference early on in November that will be a full day that you'll be out of school, and everything else, the step lab modules, the clinics are done virtually after school, so something like 4 till 6 in the evening as an example, and the communities are done after school as well. So again, been designed to be really flexible so that we're not pulling you away from the classroom. Katie, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say on that.
No, only that some delivery partners might schedule clinics in school days. So so it might be a good question just to clarify, depending on which route you choose. But yeah, the only day out of school for sure is the conference. Yeah. And then linked to that, people are asking, sort of linked to it, like, what is the only time to start this program in November? So I thought it was a good time just to clarify. There's 2 cohorts this year in November, and then a February start cohort 2. Subsequent years will be a September and a February cohort starts. So no, you don't have to start in November, although we'd love you to.
There's a couple of themes around, firstly, part-time teachers or job shares, things like that. Absolutely, it's been designed so that you can still complete this program within the year, even if you're part-time or on a job share. So you would still be coming to a clinic that would be on one of the days that you work, and you would have to communicate that to us when you applied. And then the step lab modules, as I said, really flexible. You could complete those at any point during your week. So very, very doable if you're part-time or in a job share. This is a really good question, Katie, and something that we've been talking about. Do you anticipate that because of the new NPQ options in place of an NPQML, that you might start to see specific roles advertised, for example, NPQLTD, and head teachers and schools looking for more of that specialist knowledge?
I mean, I couldn't answer really in terms of whether you're going to start seeing it on job specifications on TES, but I think that, I said at the start, I think that these qualifications have an enormous amount of potential to transform the way we think about leadership in schools. What I believe is that through going on one of these programs, our participants are going to come out with huge amounts of knowledge and understanding about how they might lead that particular area in their schools. And so I think it would be a sign of success of these programs if in 2 or 3 times a year's time people are asking for that. Similarly, I think I would want employers to be offering that as an attraction for people coming to apply to them, like, we're really on board with the NPQs, we offer them, we're supporting development in schools. So I don't know is the answer to that question. I believe they are a really powerful thing to put on your CV. Right now, I think that the sector's building knowledge around this, and so it's about selling it yourself. But I definitely think, regardless of whether anyone's asking for it, it's a really great thing to have on your CV and on your record of professional development. Yeah,
and I think if I was still ahead, and Katie and I discussed this a lot, and I had 3 members of staff on my senior leadership team, I would want them to do, one each of these specialist qualifications rather than sending 3 of them on an NPQSL. It's much more beneficial to a school to have people with that really in-depth knowledge around these specialisms, people who know how to develop teachers around them, know how to write a really good curriculum for teachers, and bring those specialisms into school. So I think we will start to see a shift in that, and certainly, as Katie said, that will be a sign of success of these reforms if we do see that shift.
And on the other end of the spectrum there, I think we've got a few people on the call who aren't necessarily looking to be a head of department or lead in kind of that kind of more formal way, maybe looking at kind of being more lead practitioners and that kind of thing. And whether the specialist qualifications are suitable for them. Absolutely. I think they're a brilliant way of developing and deepening your own classroom practice and your expertise as a teacher. So whether that's in terms of the behaviour and culture in your classroom, or the teaching in your classroom, specialist qualifications are for both teachers right up to leadership. And what we've tried to do in the design of that is, I mean, the evidence base is the evidence base regardless of your role in the school, and so we've tried to kind of share that quite like in quite like a narrative way to help busy school leaders digest, haven't got time to do that reading, the evidence behind something, And then we've provided really detailed exemplification of how that looks in schools, different types of schools, different phases, different subjects. And we've tried to vary that exemplification from people who are classroom teachers up to people who are senior leaders, so that regardless of your level, the level you're working at in school or want to work at or aspiring to, there will be exemplification in the programme so that you feel like the application of the learning is relevant to you in your setting.
Brilliant, thank you, Katie. We are bang on 4:45, and we promise you we will be 45 minutes. So we'll sign off here. There are a couple of questions around, I've registered, how do I then get my application form? If you've registered your interest, our team will be back in touch with an application form and a link so that you can go and do that. We will keep a track of this chat, and we will look out for the general themes and communicate with anybody that's got a question that is still outstanding. But the headlines are that NPQLTD is fully funded for all of you in state schools, so please take a look at that, and the other ones you'll be able to check your eligibility on our website. Katie and I will hang on this call in case you want to stay and continue to ask those questions, but we know you're busy. It's gone 4:45, so thank you very, very much for your time, and feel free to leave this webinar, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Thank you.